Next action! Brilliant, John.
Never seen a goalkeeper in my career make a save with his eyes, huh? This is my 19th year as a coach. Obviously before that I had 18 years as a player at Man City and then Southend, Huddersfield and Cardiff. You know, my daily sessions are based around the opposition that we're playing on the weekend and what successes they had, how they've scored goals, and you find certain patterns in what teams try and do. And of course I have to drip feed that then into the goalkeepers constantly, and I try and do that in the drills where I build the sessions. So a lot of the times you're trying to guide them into what they're likely to face on a Saturday. There's everything there in those 3 saves. You can only make a proper action to make a brilliant decision with your feet, Viggs. Yeah, because your set position's correct. Your set position's correct. You've got hands in the game, you've got your feet in the game because you set properly. Then you make brilliant decisions to parry out the side of the 6. All decisions that you have to make in games. Outstanding. Set! Back yourself. And again, Viggs, brilliant. Same as Saturday, that. Oh, I love that detail. Back half of the goal. Set! You know, around my coaching career that I have principles which I think are really massively important to the art of goalkeeping. One of those principles which I really feel is non-negotiable for me in what I believe around what it should look like is the position of the hands. Keeping the gloves in the game is really important because if your hands disappear out of your eye line and ball contact happens, you have to find your hands again before your brain can register what your save choice is. So to do that, even making this action where your hands drop and then you bring them back and then you have to decide what action you have to make, the ball will have already travelled half the distance. So in effect, you've reduced your time by half. I keep talking to the lads about Uhlsport. They need to see in their eye line or whatever colour glove they have on, I'll say, make sure you see Uhlsport and constantly keep referencing that because goalkeepers, you need to keep your hands in the game. They're the quickest things, I think, you know, that can react. And I'm not an expert on boxing, but what I do know is that if a boxer doesn't keep his gloves, his hands in front of his face and they drop out of the way, his opponent is probably going to knock him clean out. Yes. And I use that analogy a lot, particularly with younger goalkeepers, to help them realise that you need to keep your hands in the game to help your brain make an effective save choice.
Set. It's arriving. Good. Set.
Early part of the week, I will always do a post-match review with the goalkeeper, the pluses and the minuses. That's really important. If there's anything that happened in the game, how I can help the goalkeeper moving forward. I'm fortunate enough where, you know, the team that helped me massively, the analysis team here, they put a GoPro behind the goal, which it gives me incredible detail as to where, you know, Lawrence Vigouroux is tactically. I have a theory, a principle around, I call it the micro step, where I think the most important step for a goalkeeper is to make a small step at the beginning of the action. So then I came up with the idea of, well, when I see the net then behind the goal, if you imagine a grid reference, you know, it's almost mathematics, you need to be moving your feet into the next square. With Viggs, he's making a second action and his feet are going into almost 5 squares across, which is, you can see it's too much anyway, but using those squares, you're plotting exactly where they are technically. I mean, if you're a young goalkeeper starting your journey and, you know, you're playing obviously in the goal with nets on, if mum and dad can stand behind the goal filming, you'll be able to plot the same things as what I'm seeing, and you'll be able to then look at your footwork and see how you can move in these small squares. Because if your stride patterns as a goalkeeper when you're moving are too big, you will lose all lateral power in your takeoff. If those steps at the beginning of an action to make a save are small, you'll be explosive. So it's logical, and yeah, I have to hopefully get that message across to them, and using the squares I think is quite a powerful coaching tool.
Set! Don't sink! You're making it hard to sink in. What can't you do? Yeah, but what can't you do? Never seen a goalkeeper in my career make a save with his eyes, huh? You've got to get after the ball. Every action, get after it. You work too hard to watch the ball go past you with no dive action.
What my experience has taught me is when I'm watching the detail around how they make an action to go into a lateral dive, if they plant their foot side on and I can see 3 stripes of an Adidas boot or a Puma sign or a Nike sign, that placement of the foot it cannot be right, because now you cannot dive laterally if your foot placement is wrong. So your feet need to be constantly pointing down the pitch. You make a small action, you can get into the dive effectively. But if you plant and your foot plant lands side on, you will just watch the ball go in the net, because you cannot then generate, it's physically impossible for you to make a lateral dive when your first foot plant is wrong. And again, you might have heard me say this morning, I get frustrated then because you can't make saves with your eyes. You just end up watching the ball go in the net. So the smaller the step, you can generate power. It should look like to get into a lateral dive. It's the first step, it's small. If the first step becomes too big and too rangy, you can physically stand there and try and do it now. If you stand up and you overstride the first step, good luck then in trying to get across your goal line. You cannot do it. You lose completely all power. Small step, big saves. At any level, at any age, when an attacker hits the ball as hard as they can, but you've got the confidence to present your hands and you're able to catch it by keeping the ball still, staring at the ball, that takes a lot of repetition. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours of practice to be able to do that. We all know that in the goalkeeping world. You should enjoy that moment a bit more. You know, you should stare at the ball for 1 second longer, because the actions are not easy. It takes huge amount of training hours to be able to do that skill, and it's a high level skill, so they should enjoy it. My theory around, again, catching the ball and keeping it still, it's down to the moving parts. Like when I first started my goalkeeping journey many years ago, the coaching points then were you'd catch the ball, you'd turn the ball around, you'd bring it into your chest. There's 3 actions. So there's 3 things that possibly could go wrong, and in my career they did often go wrong. So then I just came up with, well, 1 action is far simpler, and the simplest thing to do is once the ball's hit the glove and it's stuck, you don't need to do anything else. It's the same as dealing with a high ball. Once you effectively catch the ball in the air, I will coach my goalkeepers to leave it in the sky, is another saying, because you don't need to pull it down quickly, because a lot of times you can be pulling it down into traffic. There'll be people around you, particularly on set play. Yes. So catching the ball and keeping it still is a really important technical detail.
Put the session on, you drive the standard. You have to decide. Every day. Set! Good footwork. Back after the goal. Set!
Repetition is the main thing for me. Like a typical training week for me with my goalkeepers, they'll make between 600 and 700 saves. Obviously, I said at the start of the piece I will look at what the opposition do. I'm very fortunate in that respect. I understand not every coach has that facility, but the main thing for me is that your goalkeeper works in the goal. Early on in my career, I used to use 1 million pieces of apparatus, until I decided one day that there's no apparatus on a match day. I think it's a separate training session. You know, the best thing for me when I found, as I became more experienced as a coach, was putting my goalkeeper in the goal, rehearsing all different scenarios, all different types of service, because all different types of service happen in the game. People are making volleys, people are making half volleys, people are making dippers, people are shooting from distance, people are shooting from the corner of the 6-yard box, people are heading balls. You have to try and rehearse that as many times as possible. So the best way to do that is in the goal. It's a really powerful message to me when I turn around to Lawrence Figure and say, there's not a save you haven't rehearsed this week. You've made 700 saves this week from every aspect of the, of where opposition will try and score from. And that breeds confidence then with your goalkeeper. A lot of different coaches in different sports around the world, and you can see these series on Netflix, etc. They talk about repetition, and Serena Williams standing at the net hitting 1 million volleys to improve her volleying game. I mean, this type of detail I find fascinating because goalkeeping's the same. Unless you're doing repetition after repetition after repetition, making save choice in your training week, or when you go and train locally if you're a younger goalkeeper, the more contacts you can have on the football and the more rehearsals you have in the goal, you start perfecting techniques. And everyone will have slightly different techniques, I understand that. But the objective is how to keep the ball out of the net, and you have to rehearse that. You have to keep rehearsing it, all your life if you want to go on this journey, basically.